Let's talk fearsome diseases from the 19th century, aka the Victorian era. They're pretty gross, so let's just hop right in. Starting off our list today with the king's favorite, gout, aka the disease of kings. Why was it called the disease of kings? Well, because it often came about after royals had spent a long time sitting on their hindquarters, chowing down on copious amounts of red meat and fatty foods, and then washing all of that down with a crap ton of red wine. So now we know how gout came about, but what actually is it? Well, it's a type of arthritis caused by a buildup of a chemical called uric acid in the body that causes sudden and severe joint pain, swelling and redness, and tophi formation, which is a formation of uric acid crystals that form under the skin, creating bulbous fingers, heels, toes, knees, ears, forearms, and elbows. It's unpleasant, and back then, if left untreated, could lead to a need to amputate, which no one wants. So check your diet and go for a run every once in a while, because as much as many of us want to live like kings, I guarantee you none of us want to die like the ones who suffered from gout in the 19th century. Got it? Next up, the disease of the mind. During the 19th century, alongside the rise of the Industrial Revolution, the rise of lunatic asylums, as they were once referred to, also took place. As housing for the mentally ill increased, more and more people living with disabilities were moved from their communities into asylums across England. This in no way improved the quality of life for most of these people. In fact, living inside of a 19th century asylum was a rather grim existence, to say the least. It wasn't all bad though. Those staying on the grounds were given plenty of time to exercise and enjoy the fresh air, following a strict routine that began at 6 a.m., which included growing their own food and eating 3 meals a day. It was an isolated community, but a community nonetheless. However, at the same time, of course, unethical medical procedures were being performed by untrained members of staff in buildings that would quickly become overcrowded, leading to patients often experiencing a decline in their mental well-being rather than any kind of positive outcome. Next up, we've got measles. Well, I mean, I don't, and I hope you don't either, because that would suck. Measles were, and still are, one of the most contagious human diseases out there, and they used to cause total epidemics at least once every 2 to 3 years, causing more than 2 million deaths in an incredibly short amount of time each time. In the Victorian era, measles caused severe health complications, such as high fever, cough, runny nose, red watery eyes, itchiness, infection, and, in many cases, death. It wasn't until 1963 that the first vaccination against measles, invented by John Franklin Enders, was used. The thing is though, because the disease is so highly contagious, in order to stop the spread, at least 95% of a community would have had to have been vaccinated. For a while, England was able to keep the measles problem under control, but in recent years we are seeing outbreaks become more and more common across Europe. And the UK, Greece, Czech Republic, and Albania have all lost their measles-free status. Here we go again. Next up, move over measles, because it's time to talk about malaria. That's right, back in the day, malaria didn't just occur in tropical regions such as Africa, parts of Asia, and Latin America. In fact, many cases were recorded in swampy regions of Paris, London's River Thames, and Sardinia, Italy. In fact, in the late 1800s, Sardinia had a death rate of 300 per 100,000 inhabitants, all thanks to the buzzy little busybodies carrying the disease in their incredibly small but incredibly deadly bodies. So, how was Europe able to rid themselves of the disease transferred to humans through insects that cause shivers, chills, high fever, sweating, and sometimes death? A huge post-war program of insecticide spraying, swamp draining, and drug therapy. And bada bing bada boom, by 2005 they were home free from the wretched disease. While this is all good and well, the rise of other mosquito-borne diseases around the world, such as dengue and the West Nile virus, has led scientists to the conclusion that we may very well be seeing malaria making a comeback in the upcoming years. That's not good news. Alright, let's talk syphilis, the STBD that is still around today and can be treated with penicillin if caught early, but killed a crap ton of people living in the Victorian era because penicillin hadn't been invented yet. Because of this, people who contracted the disease through coital interactions had bad reactions that came in stages. The first stage was a painless sore on the tongue, lips, or nether regions. The second was a rash that was accompanied by fever and or fatigue. The third is where the bacteria malaria settles into the body, making it their home, and the fourth is when you die of organ failure. It really takes the lovely out of making love. In the late 19th century, it is estimated that over 1 in 5 people living in London contracted the disease, and that a whole lot of them died. While the exact number of deaths that occurred during the time period as a result of the disease is unknown, scientists do refer to the numbers as being in the crap tons. Yep, that's real science. Next up, we have yellow fever. While no one knows for sure, it is believed that yellow fever has been around, causing death and despair for at least 3,000 years. It likely started in Africa and then made its way across the world, transported by mosquitoes who rode barges and sailboats from Africa to the tropics to America, and America to the rest of the world. The disease starts off similar to the common flu, with symptoms of headache, fever, muscle pain, nausea, and vomiting. But as the disease progresses, so do the negative accompaniments: higher fever, jaundice, internal bleeding, shock, organ failure, and death. Of course. During the Victorian era, it was believed that yellow fever was transmitted from one infected person to another, and so efforts to keep the disease from spreading were pretty much a moot point. In 1881, however, a scientist realized that the disease was being spread by mosquitoes, not people, and purposefully infected a test subject to prove his theory. He was right, but still, no one believed him, and so thousands more died because of this. Next up, we have not the first or the second, but the third cholera outbreak. You know what they say, third time's the charm, right? The cholera outbreak of the 19th century was among the most deadly in history. It lasted from 1852 into 1860 and claimed the lives of countless millions of people around the world, and 23,000 in Great Britain alone. The pandemic began in India and then tore through the rest of Asia before moving on to Europe, North America, and Africa. The disease was transmitted through contaminated water and airborne vapors coming from rotting organic matter. Symptoms included diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, extreme dehydration, lethargy, erratic heartbeat, sunken eyes, and dry, shriveled skin. Treatments included tying patients to their beds and having them drink warm tea. Needless to say, oftentimes, efforts proved extremely futile, and a crap ton of people died. Alright, for these last three, I am going to be taking some slight liberties, because while boracic acid, carbolic acid, and asbestos are not technically diseases, they did kill a lot of people in the 19th century, so think of them as honorable mentions. Starting off with boracic acid, which was commonly found in Victorian era homes in their milk. In 1882, a test was done on 20,000 samples of milk, and it was found that over 1/5 had been contaminated with boracic acid. On purpose. It was believed by many homemakers that the acid would purify milk once it had gone bad. They were told it was harmless, but they were told wrong. The boracic acid caused nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. But it gets worse. Not only did the boracic acid cause all of those nasty symptoms, it made people think that spoiled milk, often infected with bovine tuberculosis, was safe to drink. It is estimated that during the Victorian era, up to 500,000 young people died from drinking infected milk alone, and I'm sure the addition of boracic acid symptoms didn't help with the mortality rate either. Acid number 2 today is carbolic acid, a product that changed the way in which we label cleaning products, and for good reason too. You see, in the Victorian era, the area of methane-filled bathrooms and toxic milk apparently, ironically cleanliness was held in extremely high regard. It was considered next to godliness. To be clean and to have a clean home was a sign of good morals and respectability, and so chemical cleaning products became the go-to for many housekeepers in the time period. A crowd favorite was carbolic acid, which was often kept in bottles and boxes that were pretty much identical to common baking products such as baking soda, baking powder, cream of tartar, cornstarch, you name it. Basically, there was a lot of ways to ruin a cake in a 19th century kitchen. When carbolic acid, a depressant of the nervous system, is ingested, it causes headache, dizziness, unconsciousness, coma, and in many cases, death. Duh. In 1902, after a number of people had already died from ingesting the product, the Pharmacy Act finally made it illegal for bottles of dangerous chemicals to be similar in shape to ordinary liquids or powders. Thank God. And finally, to finish us off today, the thing that finished many people off in the 1900s, it's asbestos. In the 20th century, the fibrous silicate mineral material was seen as a wonder material. It was non-flammable, cheap, and clean. It was used in just about every home for just about everything. Hair dryers, floor tiles, toys, ovens, gutters, insulation, and even clothing. Only problem was, it was deadly. Because of all the small sharp fibers that make up asbestos, breathing it in any amount, was extremely detrimental to a person's lungs. Although it is impossible to know the exact number of deaths to occur at the time as a direct result of asbestos exposure, the number is believed to be in the tens of thousands. Today, asbestos is fully banned in 62 countries, including Canada, Europe, and Asia. America is still working on phasing it out. Fun fact while we're here, while The Wizard of Oz was not filmed in the Victorian era, but rather in 1939, they did still use asbestos while on set. That's right, the snow scene in the film is actually deadly, densely packed shards of asbestos fibers. I'd like to go home now, Auntie M. Okay you guys, that was our video for today. Super fun one to do. Stay safe, stay healthy. I've been your host, Hannah Thompson. Together we are keeping the past present.